I just wanted to quickly introduce the two speakers. There is Sasono. He is a PhD student, and he's also a film critic, and he works for the BBC. And this is Dr. Felicia Hughes-Freeland, who is affiliated with SOAS, and she has done long years of research in Indonesia, mainly on Indonesian dance, but she has also an interest in Indonesian documentary film, and she's going to talk about women in Indonesian documentary film. Unfortunately, May Adadol, who was also in the program, she can't make it today, which is really a shame, but her son fell ill with tonsil infection, and he has a high fever, and he can't be here, unfortunately. And then we have Tito. Tito is on Skype. And he's also a PhD student at Goldsmiths University. And he is in Indonesia at the moment. So yeah, that's why he's on Skype. And he's going to show, well, I'm going to screen a film later, a work that he's working on. It's a documentary and also a film on Indonesian dance. So I hope you enjoy the discussion.
Hello everyone, thank you for coming on Sunday. I know this might be a special event for you to make it on Sunday, and we didn't really have any arrangement who should go first for this presentation, and we still have a discussion. But I'm going to talk about much more general idea and the overview about the Indonesian documentary film. So I think I should go first, and then Felicia can jump into something much more specific on the documentary film in Indonesia. My presentation would be the recent development of Indonesian documentary film, and this is the part of the subject of my PhD research in King's College in London, where I'm trying to find the conception of public and publicness behind the documentary film development in Indonesia since 1998. As you know that in 1998, Indonesia has undergone a major political change, and since then the media environment has changed drastically, and so many things happened since then. But the question remains the same. Is it that the main question of the current situation is it really changed? Is there any what we call as rupture in Indonesian current situation, or is it just the continuation of what has happened in the past? And I don't really want to see it in that way, in terms of this thing still going on the same, and we have different kind of situation, because I don't really want to put some sort of essentialism in the history of Indonesia. But I think it is important to highlight some features of Indonesian media policy and film policy during the new order of Indonesia. And actually, we have Tito's working on the keyboard now. Tito, we can hear you. Okay.
Sorry.
Okay, thank you, Tito. Okay, basically I will talk about some general overview of the production and the production model, formats, and I will touch also about some of the themes and the circulations of Indonesian documentary film, and basically this will be the main chunk of my my project. Talking about the film policy in New Order Indonesia, 1966 through 1998, I'd like to quote an Australian scholar, Krishna Sen, who's been studying Indonesian films since decades ago, and still continue until now. And he is also the chair of Indonesian studies in in one of the universities in Australia. I forgot which universities. Sorry. I think this encapsulates the situations of Indonesian film policy back in New Order during 1966 to 1998. New Order Indonesian policy is caught between the nationalist rhetoric of protecting Indonesian culture from foreign incursions and the restrictive policing of creative options for Indonesian filmmakers. Thus, the positioning of cinema within the state apparatus emphasizes its media information influence and hence security and propaganda dimension rather than film's artistic or creative dimension. The nationalist rhetoric is very important during the New Order because that's the main thing that's been propagated throughout the nations by Indonesian New Order, and they do it according to another Indonesian scholar, Aberle. They do this nationalist rhetoric not only with a propaganda machine, but also combined with state violence and terrorism, meaning that there are censorship, of course, also control over many institutions, including films institutions, related to production, distribution, and circulation, consumption of films in Indonesia. The control was really tight. Includes submission of film script before it's screened to the Ministry of Information, and the censorship guideline is also very strict at the time, and saying that the guideline has two codes of ethics to avoid all reference to social conflicts or tension in Indonesia. Therefore, films are to be banned or excised if they are deemed to be able to destroy the unity of religions in Indonesia and social harmony, harm the development of national consciousness, or exploit feelings of ethnicity, religion, or ancestry, or incite social tensions, or even arouse sentiments of ethnicity, religion, and race, and engender social tension, including those between the rich and poor, as one former head of intelligence explained at the seminar at the censorship board. I quoted that from Sen as well in his same writing. The censorship code is very strict in terms of trying to put the harmony up front to be represented throughout the nation, using many kind of circulation tools, including mostly the Indonesian television at the time and cinema as well. For a documentary case, it was the Indonesian television who's been in the front line in distributing and circulating documentary films. Talking about the television in Indonesia, it could be the television in Indonesia can be understood as part of the Indonesia's national culture project, the shorthand of the Philip Kitley. He's a researcher in Ohio State University. The shorthand expression for a range of state-sponsored and directed activities designed to legitimate symbolically Indonesian national culture identity. And this cultural identity is very important in terms of giving the overview of Indonesian documentary film at the time. So basically, I will go now to the production and the production model. The production of the documentary film was dominated by state-owned television, the TVRI, Televisi Republik Indonesia, and PPFN, Pusat Perusahaan Film Negara, or state-owned film company, and all the productions coming from these two organizations, two institutions. But there are also a few numbers of directors, mainly from the film schools, which was established in 1971. That's the first film school, and the only until some times ago. There are some notable names such as David Bransi, Hadi Purnomo, and Johan Trangi, and they worked together in a not only doing documentary but also experimental films, especially Bransi, who's considered to be one of the most important names in experimental films in Indonesia. And Trangi as well. He doesn't really have any space to produce, so he works for, as you can see in the production model, they provide footage for foreign broadcasters. That's also one of their channels in making the documentary. Trangi also worked for the BBC and NHK, the Japanese broadcaster, and some German TVs, sending them footages based on the commercial requests from those institutions. And that's also another important name, just Alwi, which he collects historical footages, and none of them nothing really released. It's footages from pre-war Indonesia films, Indonesian Independence War, and many others. For the production model of the documentary film is dominated by TVRI, and it's done in the TVRI in-house productions, and also some of the films are commissioned by state institution or quasi-state institution, and footage for foreign broadcast, as I mentioned. The formats, I think it's important since the censorship is very strong in glorifying the national culture and national identity, and also national development. This become the main staple for the Indonesian documentary at the time. What the government wants is to produce state propaganda films, mainly on national development, the glorification of economic success of the national development, the Gelora Pembangunan series. Usually it's short documentaries, 5 to 20 minutes, depicting the success of development, the Revolusi Hijau, the Green Revolution, construction of a big infrastructure, and so on and so forth. And also the public service information on certain issues such as health issues, the government program, family planning, so transmigration, and these, especially for these types of film, Indonesian scholars, Indonesian filmmakers have the unique name. They call it film pass, or applied film, because mostly it tells stories about epidemic and trying to educate people on how to deal with epidemic or things like that. And besides that, there's also a scenic travelogue and encounter with obscure ethnic groups considered to be the less advantaged people, has to be represented in national media as part of the national culture. It's very, very essentialist and very, very putting the ethnic groups into essential and familiar others of the Indonesian. And if you talk about the circulation, it's very, very limited. The TVRI and some of the films, some of the short documentaries, especially the Gelora Pembangunan, were used for the opening for main attraction in movie screening and open air cinema or layar tancap. Because during the New Order, we had 3,000 cinemas, including in small cities and towns and villages even. But now we only have 700, but that's a different story. Every time they screen film, it's mandatory for them to screen short films on national, the Gelora Pembangunan series. Okay, and as you know that this is big things happened in 1998, where the New Order, Suharto being toppled from his position, he resigned, and then Indonesia changed drastically into one of the freest media environment in Asia. And now we have 10 national private TV stations rather than just one. And the censorship strangely remains the same, with the code still intact, even though they made some changes in terms of the mechanism, with the appeal mechanism for the filmmakers if they are not satisfied with the decision from the film censorship board. And also another change is they can also do the cutting themselves rather than the film being cut by the censorship board. And now we have the 700 to 600 movie houses rather than 3,000 in the old days, because of the the economic situation that demands the cinema to be modernized and gentrified, and little by little it's getting less and less, because small movie houses in towns is no longer feasible in business, so they have to join the conglomerates of the movie houses. And the media policy are scattered, and we have new channel in distribution, film festivals, not only for distribution but also in nurturing talents, because within the festival usually some activists also conduct some workshops to nurture talents, new talents. And they are booming in independent film production, which come along with the DIY culture, including, of course, documentary films. Well, basically this happens in 1999 to 2000 with the digital equipment, and Indonesians also very adaptive towards the new technology. And they changed the tools to digital equipment, and the products just flood to the market. In post-1998, despite all the changes that I mentioned in media environment, documentary films in Indonesia remains in a marginal position, because nobody really see in the market potentials of documentary films. As entertainment, it's also considered to be boring, to be less attractive compared to fiction films. And I think it's important it's also important how Indonesians see documentary film, which I found some sort of resonance in the Michael Channon's assertions on documentary film as a documentary. Documentary is a battleground of social and historical truth, and this is one of the main reasons why people make them. So during my preliminary research to some documentary filmmakers, they see documentary film as something that they use to challenge the reality and to propose their versions of truth. And I think regardless of the production mode and whatever they use, most of the filmmakers see themselves as someone who carries this mission against the backdrop of the changing situation in Indonesia. Now, compared to the previous era in the before 1998, the production aspect of documentary film changed drastically. We still have the state film company to produce documentaries. One of them is Aroma Kopi. It won an award in one of the festivals, and TVRI is still producing documentaries as well. But the one who's been really taking over the state role in producing documentary is NGO. It's non-government organizations such as TIPA Foundation, Pop Foundations, and many other NGOs. And there are also some quasi-government institutions. They commission some filmmakers to produce documentaries, such as the Human Rights Commissions. Film schools still active in producing documentary film. And private TV stations, they also jump in. Since 2002, they're allowed to produce news. Well, I think it's even before that, but it's 2002. The government issued a decree that they are allowed to produce news and current affairs. And private TV stations, even though they're not really keen on making documentaries as the main attraction, but they're still producing it. And film community, many film communities, as I mentioned earlier about the DIY culture and this people who really loves watching films. They try to make films themselves and they start to make films their own. Which one of them, maybe one of the most important community is the cinema lovers community in district of Purbalingga, population 1 million something. They try to really make documentary film as something meaningful in terms of the against the establishment. This is one of their tweets. I capture it. As you can see, the text: before the historical building of Kalibagor Sugar Factory totally flattened to the ground, film it. They really have the ethos of being the alternative towards the establishment. They even have this romantic feeling about the function of camera as a resistance tool. And they have their own festival, which already in the 11th year this year, 11th edition, still running up to now, and they use very modest equipment. Like they have the layar tancap, where they have stick, they have a pole mast stick to the ground, and then they just erect the screen, and then they use overhead projector, such as that one. Very modest equipment. And the production model, in the production model we have the private in-house production from the TV stations, Metro TV, Kompas TV, one of the few TVs that are still producing documentary up to now, and some TV commissioning. Watchdog is an organization, is an NGO, and they also have the commercial wings in the NGO to take the work from Kompas TV to produce some documentary. And NGO commissioning as well, it's one of the reasons, the blossoming of documentary films nowadays. And the workshop with TV stations, Eagle Award, which started in 2002, one of the biggest and most influential documentary films nowadays, because they have a very high profile awarding ceremony, and they work with some celebrities. They really try to make it into a national movement to use documentary as also I have to mention that Eagle Award is established by Metro TV, so it's linked to the TV stations. I already mentioned NGO commissioning, but they also hold workshops. They work with some international NGOs and also some commercial entities, nurturing filmmakers, especially novice and young filmmakers, aspiring filmmakers, to submit their project, and then they work together to develop it. One of the most influential one is the Project Change with Kalian Nasira. And small scale enterprise, I will discuss about this later. And also there are some transnational production, Leonel Rethel Helmrich trilogy. Daniel Zev is a Canadian, making Jalanan, the stories about 3 street buskers. And of course, Joshua Oppenheimer's The Act of Killing. I don't really want to talk about this because we have talked about this film so many times. Also public funding nowadays, governments start to pour some money, even though not really big, and they put this public funding together with this is the endowment from the government on some projects. It's documentary film and short films together being funded by the government, if you're lucky, after. Yes. and also foreign funding. And this become very interesting part because nowadays Indonesian filmmakers are more international savvy. They know the market nowadays compared to back in 1990s. They know there are some money in Busan, in Korea, in Leipzig, in New York, Copenhagen, in Sheffield as well. They try to submit the project and go with the funding market. And this is one of the examples of the NGO commissioning film. And I would like to cite the Makbul Mubarak, one of the most prominent film critics nowadays in Indonesia. Hundreds of Indonesian documentary filmmakers, professional and amateurs alike, have produced their projects within a framework of issues that are the path course of specific NGOs such as environmental conversation. And this one is about domestic violence, memory of hope. And I'll talk about the small-scale enterprise, and I will like to single out Tony Trimarsanto. Actually, I think he's the first one who has this kind of production models, which he constantly producing documentary film as his main work, as his main job. He doesn't really have anything else other than making documentary film, and he's selling it through the online platform. You cannot really think about the online platform in the UK. And basically he sells DVD of his films, not online streaming because the infrastructure is not really good. And people also don't really trust the online transaction. So it's like he just used his website and Facebook account to promote and sell the films, and then he will send the DVD. He print the DVD himself, and also put it in the envelope and send it to you if you want to buy it. And he's also have the international distribution. Recently, 4 films are in his distribution contract for 5 years, and he can earn $2,000 per year for this from these 4 films, and he said that's not bad, for doing things for full time. And now some distributors, some producers help him, working with him in some project, including trying to get international fundings. And the format, we still talk about the same thing, similar to the New Order model. Voice-over narrator exoticize Indonesia and its people, especially the one that produced by the state film company. Activism and campaign material inciting awareness on certain social and political issues, where the screening is sometimes followed by the discussion. And most of the time it becomes an issue for the filmmakers of creative freedom, because they think they have to come with the term set by the NGO rather than their own willing. I mentioned Eagle Award, and they're really strong in broadcast format. Inspirational stories, which they try to incite the stories about other people's struggling and take life lesson from it. Mostly overtly dramatized scenes and music. Voice-over model as well. But sometimes there are also the investigative and hard-hitting and in-depth journalism, mostly by Watchdog, which is very active in producing documentary films nowadays. Observational documentaries, starting in 2006, I think, with Lucas Moment, made by Aberle, who is now studying in Harvard as an anthropologist. Personal note, Akar, which I think is also will be screened, I don't know, if you have time. And experimental documentaries, coming from independent filmmakers. This is one of the example of the experimental documentary, 17,000 Islands by Edwin and Norwegian filmmaker Thomas Oisby. It's an interactive documentary. You can see the website, 17,000 Island, based on the miniature of Indonesia that's produced by Suharto regime in Taman Mini Indonesia Indah, 17,000 Islands, and it's part of the Indonesian national culture. They want to challenge this. They said the image of Indonesia, it's not set, it's not stable. Rather, they want to challenge it, and we want the audience to make their own pictures of Indonesia, make your own island from the footages they provide there. It's very interesting. It's very interesting project, and it's still going until now. I think it was released in 3 years ago already. I don't know how far it reached Indonesian audience, but it's a very interesting concept. And the circulation, I mentioned about the festivals and private stations, international festival. Indonesian filmmakers are really aware of the existence of international festivals, and they take advantage from it because they know it's difficult to rely on the domestic market, so international festivals is their main stage. And major cinema, some cinemas also screen Indonesian documentary. Indonesian Student Movement 1998 is a record-breaking documentary in many aspects. It's the first Indonesian documentary to be screened in Indonesian cinema in the history of the nation. And the duration is 43 minutes. It's even less than a feature-length presentation. So, but he managed the filmmaker managed to get the deal with the major cinema. There's a long story behind it. The JAG, it's about the football hooligans. Conductors, it's a combination between the football hooligans and one of the famous Indonesian conductors, Adi. I forgot. Adi. Who? Adi who?
MS.
Yeah, Adi MS. Yeah, Adi MS. Yeah, it's sorry. And pertaruhan or at stake, it's from the project Change that I mentioned earlier. And alternative spaces, film clubs, universities, galleries, NGO, film communities, they tend to screen it there. And online platform, YouTube, and recently Fitsi. Fitsi is very good resource for you if you're studying Indonesian or Southeast Asian subject, because it's like online platform, it's like YouTube, but mainly short and documentary films from Southeast Asia, and the curation is just perfect. It's you have to take a look. Well, I'm not linked to Fitsi at all, but I think it's worth the experience. I want to close it with one of the experimental documentary from Aryo Danusiri, which I think encapsulates the creative force behind the documentary film making in Indonesia. It's not only about the filmmakers but also about the subject. How the subject is very, very interesting in Indonesia nowadays for the documentary films to just get the camera out and record them. And this is one of the examples of how the energy is there. This film is made in 2013, recorded. He records this crowd who gathers in Merdeka Square in Jakarta. They gather there on monthly basis to listen to a sermon from Islamic scholars. And Danusiri's subject is actually about Islam and urban mobility in Indonesia. That's his subject for his PhD project in Harvard, and he also made this documentary as part of his work. What he does is just get the camera out and record them making a scene by themselves. Let me play it for you. It's an excerpt, like 40 seconds. also my presentation. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, everybody. How are we going to get out of here? Oops. Let's see. Okay. I'm glad Eric went first because he's given you a big overview, academic overview, and my paper or talk is more from the inside, if you like, about process and practice, because I'm trained as an anthropologist. I'm also trained as a filmmaker, been very active in one field of documentary in Britain, which is ethnographic film, anthropological film. And we actually had Aberle in this lecture theatre. I think it was 2002 or 3. He was on it. We got him funding to come over and show his early films. So we feel we've helped Aberle on his career, and I'll mention him briefly in my talk. What I wanted to do today is to talk about women within the documentary movement. Women's film culture is barely recognised within Indonesia or international film discourse. And there are now 5 times as many women directors in Indonesia as there were in the New Order. And during the New Order, there were 4. This is not unique to Indonesia. Women's roles in the film industry globally have been problematic, and as a documentary filmmaker I've been involved in women's networks trying to do something about this, and that's why I'm focusing on women Indonesian filmmakers in the last 6 or 7 years, a bit longer. So what I want to do is, Eric has sort of given you an overview really of the kind of changes that happened between the Suharto era, the New Order, and what is now called the Reform era, or Reformasi. I was making a film in Indonesia, a documentary in Indonesia in 1986, and as an external filmmaker, I was subject to all kinds of regulations, and I was supposed to have a Ministry of Information guide with me at the cost of $25 a day. But I didn't have that in my budget. Because I spoke very good Indonesian and I was able to do a lot myself, they let me off having this minder and said, but never tell anybody. But as it's new, now that's older, it's finished, so I can tell you. But it was quite a thing, and there was a lot of surveillance and regimentation, not only of documentary filmmaking within Indonesia, but also academic research in Indonesia. It took me 2 years to get a research visa in the early 80s. So this gives you an idea. Of course, there are still constraints on people, but when I spoke to young documentarists, they said that it's more flexible, there are ways around it, and digital equipment is more easy to use surreptitiously than using 16mm equipment, which is what I was using, and you can't use that secretly very easily. And there are all sorts of ethical problems with being secretive as well, but anyway. Since 1998, Eric has outlined some of the kinds of films that have been made in the documentary genre. I would put it slightly differently from him, perhaps. Ethnographic films, grassroots community films, activist and campaigning films. And these are, I would argue, among one of the most striking forms of cultural expression about political freedom within contemporary Indonesia, and also part of the ongoing movement to develop greater awareness of social inequality and the need for more robust forms of social justice. Should be moving my thing forward. Oops, about this. Sorry about that. Get my PowerPoint. Incidentally, some of the pre-reform era films that Eric was talking about, the seething development films that used to be on television, there is an archive in SOAS that I was involved in the research for. Eventually it was called the Bismarck Project. Professor Mark Hobart and I worked on this, and in the early 90s we recorded performance films on television and development films. So if anyone is interested in that material, I don't know if you see, that material should be in the SOAS archive somewhere, library, but I haven't been using it. And all the narratives are transcribed and translated. I think they got translated into English, but they've all been transcribed. So if any of you are interested in this, that is a really remarkable archive. Now, why women? It's not just me. Oops, we don't want that yet. Oh yes, we're here. We can have this picture. I just put this picture in because this is an image from a film about the city bus in Jakarta, made by a filmmaker called Lulu Ratna. Nothing wrong with that. And this, for me, summarises the difference between the Suharto era and after. You could not have got on a bus with a camera before 1998 in Jakarta without being probably arrested. And Lulu's her film's always about travelling. It's just following people around on a city bus. It's a wonderful little film. And we'll just look at that picture while I briefly say why it's important to think about women and cinema, and particularly documentary in Indonesia. Because, and I'm aware, speaking to an audience from a lot of you from Southeast Asia, but as an anthropologist, when I used to teach about gender in Southeast Asia, I always used to say that the position of women in Southeast Asia is a lot better than in many other parts of the world. And there's been a lot of debate in the social sciences about this and whether the impact of modernization and industrialization has actually improved the position of women across Southeast Asia. Now, of course, social practices and gender ideologies within and between Southeast Asian countries vary enormously. I don't like making generalizations, so have to recognize this variation. Within Indonesia, there's been a lot of discussion about the impact of the new order finishing and the new era, the more democratic era, the impact of that on women. And in fact, in some respects, things have got worse for women. Political decentralization has led to some quite varied forms of legislation coming in, and in some areas in Indonesia we have Sharia law, which is not always so great for women. There's also been an increase in polygamous marriages, which were regulated and controlled more by the new order, and this is also a cause of concern for many Indonesian women. There was a woman president for a while, Megawati Soekarno Putri, but that was probably more because she was the daughter of a former president than because she was a woman, and it was a highly controversial and troubled presidency. But generally speaking, women now are considered to be more excluded from politics than they were even in the colonial period, that's an academic argument from Susan Blackburn. So women filmmakers born between 1970 and 1980 mostly, my sample, are turning to specific examples of women's experience, and not just women, as we'll see, who suffer injustice and exclusion because of structural problems, structural conditions within society. And this is why I think it's very important to notice what they are doing in Indonesian documentary. Now, I had a slide which complements Eric. It's quite interesting, the difference, how I've done this, because these were the organisations that people told me about. So this came out of conversations with the women I spent time with and interviewed with. And the networks that I was using were basically inside Jakarta, the capital city, and they centred around IKJ, where there had been one of the long-standing film courses, a real hub for networking for women. The Indocs NGO, which ran competitions, particularly script writing competitions and festivals, and was set up by Shanti Harman, who had trained in Stanford back in 2002. And Shanti was also one of the founders of the Jakarta International Film Festival, also script development, maybe that's where the script development came from. Important for the filmmakers I work with. Eric mentioned Kalyana Shira. There's a production company and also a foundation. This is very much associated with Nia Dinata, the production company, and in 2006 the foundation was set up with her and a number of other people, and we'll be coming to them again. And they very much focus on human rights issues, women's rights, human rights in general, and other marginalised groups within Indonesia. Aryo Danusiri set up two organisations together with Lulu Ratna, who's on the bus film I mentioned, and those organisations, I thought they might not be doing anything anymore, but I noticed on the internet that they are still running festivals. I think they've just had their 14th festival, Bumbu. So they are continuing, and they did a huge amount, not only to help networks within Jakarta, but to take documentary outside the capital, round the islands. And for those who don't know, I mean, Indonesia is a very, very large, diverse area, and it's not homogeneous space. Many areas are sort of isolated, they don't have access to a lot of things. So taking films outside the capital, outside Java, is very, very important. And I'll say a little bit more about that. Oh, I should say that although I'm focusing on Jakarta, I know of women documentarists working outside the city, in the region, so Bandung and Jogja, but also outside the island of Java in places like North Sumatra and Sumbawa. I'm going to close with some comments about Sumbawa, for example. Okay. Now, really, I want to fill in, perhaps, give you a bit of portrait and some ideas of content within the categories that have been set up for you. Oh, look, someone's online. Let me get rid of them. And I wanted to take you through, if I've got time, yes I have. These four filmmakers are the ones I would like to just introduce you to. Sort of it's kind of meet the filmmakers in their absence. And two of them a bit shy about their date of birth, but Nia, 1970, Uchu Agustin, who works closely with Nia, so I'll talk about them together. Ariani Jalal, whose latest film was shown at SOAS last month, or earlier this month, just finished. And then Yuli Andari, who is the one filmmaker who is not working in the Jakarta network and is doing some very interesting things. So let us proceed. Okay, this is Nia Dinata. I'm afraid I didn't have a nice photo of Nia, one from my research, so this is off the web. And Nia, Kalyana Shira are very fussy about using their images, and this is their logo. Nia Dinata really brought Kalyana Shira to the attention of the Indonesian public and foreign scholars by a fiction film called Love for Share, Berbagi Suami, 2006, which was a 4-film feature about polygamy. There were 4 short stories about polygamy from the women's perspective, and this made a big impact. And I won't talk about it anymore because this is about documentary, but that was a film that explored issues that in a way documentary has not been doing. as far as I'm aware. Eric might know examples that have been, but I haven't come across any. Sometimes fiction allows you to do things that documentary does not. Kalyana Shira Foundation runs the Project Change workshops that Eric mentioned, and in 2008 it ran one on the subject of sexual health, and as a result of that film, this is a picture from Love for Share, as a result of that workshop, Kalyana Shira produced Pertaruan at Stake. The last film in the group of 4, again, this is a popular format in the sort of post-Suharto cinema, a sort of portmanteau film. Ucu Agustin directed a film in East Java about women who earn their living as stone breakers, and she followed them observationally, and in the film we see how they have to work as prostitutes at night in a Chinese cemetery up a local mountain to supplement their meagre living as stone breakers. And actually the gangsters, the sort of pimps in the cemetery, take a large proportion of their earnings as well. And this was quite a shocking film because the camera was going somewhere that would never have been shown before in Indonesian cinema. It's quite unusual, even in Britain. Kim Longinotto, incidentally, is having a film, I think, on Channel 4 this week, called Dreamcatcher, about prostitution in Chicago. So she also going into this area. I recommend that film, by the way. Wonderful film. So this film by Ucu Agustin was one of 4. Pertaruan was selected for the Berlinale in 2009, and it was the first Indonesian documentary ever to be shown in that festival. The whole film is screened on the Engage Media site. We're talking about distribution. I'll say a little bit more about that later, but this is the website should you wish to see a subtitled version of Pertaruan. It's still live, I checked the other day. Now, Ucu Agustin, who directed Ragate Anak, the last of the 4 films in Pertaruan, is a writer, a journalist and a filmmaker, and at the moment the most ostensibly political of Indonesian women documentarists, and actually met her the day after President Suharto died, when I was doing some field work in Indonesia. Oops, sorry, I skipped that. And there was a protest against Suharto going on outside the Soekarno-Hatta monument in Jakarta. And I was trying to meet Ucu to interview her and talk to her about being in a film that I never got money to make. And here she is, filming with her tiny little digital camera in the middle of all the big media coverage. And the battery ran out. Anyone make films here? You know batteries? Anyway, we used my hotel room as a bit of a production office, and I helped a bit with this. This footage, as far as I'm aware, is still being processed. She has an interest in death as a theme, social aspects of death, death of poor people, death of celebrities like Suharto, and she made a very interesting film about the death of the famous left-wing writer Pramudia Anantatur, called The Last Chapter of Pramudia. Unthinkable in the New Order. Unthinkable that something like this could be done. In 2013, she made a major feature-length documentary over 2 hours long called Behind the Frequency, about media and politics. And she used 2 storylines to do this in a documentary form. She followed a woman called Luviana, who had been sacked from Metro TV, which has been mentioned as a documentary producer and runner of Eagle Awards. And she was trying to set up a trade union. And this has always been a major problem in Indonesia from before the reform era and into it. And the film follows her attempt after she's been sacked to get her job back. And it's extraordinary because all these meetings are filmed and they go on, they're quite lengthy but very, very detailed film. And this is a slide of the kind of discussion that happens in the film. The other story, I'm going to show you a clip if I have time. I can't remember, didn't notice when I started, but this is a bit of the clip I'm going to show you. Protest about her being sacked. This slide just summarises a lot of information for you that I don't really want to go through, but notice this is the Indonesian media has been referred to as an oligopoly because all the companies that own those enormous numbers of radio stations, print publications, so on and so forth, are owned by 12 people. Out of those thousands of organisations, 34 only have trade unions. And in the film, there are two of the owners in particular who are highlighted. Suryo Paloh, who is the chair of the political party NASDEM, National Democrats, and also owns a media group that owns Metro TV. And then the second character is Abu Rizal Bakri, who is the chair of the functional groups, which is actually the political party used to support Suharto. He also owns the media group VC Media Asia, and importantly, Energi Mega Sodo, or Persada, so I pronounce it the Japanese way, he's laughing, including the oil company Lapindo Brantas. And that's very important because the second story is about the mud flow that happened in 2006 in East Java when Lapindo Brantas were drilling, and a huge area was covered in mud. And I think 7 villages were wiped out. So what she's done in her film, she filmed 300 hours, well, her camera people did, and they cut a very complicated story interleaving Ludhiana's protest against Suryo Paloh, her boss, and then a demonstration, a long walk from East Java to Jakarta in protest about this. Now, I'm not going to tell you what happened in case you get to see this film. It's not easy to get hold of. I had to have it transferred in bits. But I wouldn't like to spoil it for you. It doesn't work out happily for anybody, really. In a sense, you could say it was a thwarted protest, but as a process film about struggle within Indonesia, it's very, very interesting. And I think that some people in Britain who saw it when I was talking about it recently are wanting to use it in their media studies courses. So any of you doing media studies, try and find Behind the Frequency by Utsu Agustin. Now, I said she was very political, but actually, do I have time to show just a 2-minute clip of that? Okay, right, now this is going to be fun. How to get out of this. Okay, this gives you a flavour of, I can make it work. Please work.
Sekarang di media-media banyak yang nonton, bos. Yang nasibnya tergantung tanggal. Besok pada di PHK. Tidak akan pernah abadi. Buahnya Pak Menteri katanya berani. Lihat nih, tambah nih. Metro masa nggak berani.
Pak, boleh kasih komentar ya?
Oh jangan deh, gua. Jangan.
Frekuensinya bukan. Jangan diangkut, yang lain aja.
do people want to be, how do I do this? Resume from current slide, okay, yes. Yes, people don't want to be, they'll say something but they don't want to be filmed saying it. And the history of most Indonesians lived through such an intensely repressed period. Political expression was completely forbidden, really. And it's, although people talk a lot more about politics than they ever did, there is still this ingrained caution and fear about speaking out, which makes these documentaries all the more remarkable. It is not something that can be undertaken lightly. Uchu is not only making these grandstanding political films, and I wanted to mention a film from last year which was made again in relation to this overview we had from Eric, in relation to a Kalyana Shira, lost my place, Kalyana Shira project called Kid Doc, and it was financed by Kalyana Shira Foundation and the Goethe Institute. And the Goethe Institute is one of the international cultural agencies that's playing a huge part in promoting Indonesian documentary. It's very interesting what they're doing. Not only in Indonesia, but they're publishing books about Indonesian documentary in Europe and so on and so forth. This little film is about Lintang, the boy you can see in the picture. He's a child, he cannot see, and he's been at a special needs school for 7 years. He's now aged 11 in the film. He's a very good drummer, he has a band, he has really good friends, but his parents have decided it's time for him to leave this school and go to a regular school. So it's a very poignant, simple observational film about this child's last days or last weeks in his school. And very, very disturbing. But it is interesting because a lot has been written about children in cinema and documentary in general, in film studies. And this film, which really gives the child the power, if you like, even though he is powerless against his parents. It's very much from his perspective, and very interesting for that. Another person, my last example, no, it's not my last, Ariani Jalal has also been working with children. Excuse the out of focus picture. This is Ariani on the in 2008, and Lulu Ratner at the other end. Ariani started out doing a philosophy degree, and she started doing grassroots films with Ragam organisation in Banda Aceh after Sharia law had been introduced in 1999, and not long after the tsunami of 2004. And she went with, again, Uchu Agustin as camera mentor, other women who are in this network, and they trained up young women in Aceh to use the camera, and they produced a film called Women and Sharia. And these images come from the second part, where there's a sequence, very simple, of women in the kitchen, in the living room, looking after children, working, intercut with the men in the cafe, smoking their ciggies. And that's just a simple sequence, simple editing, but it makes a point about, a rather basic point about women and work and social issues around that. Now, Ariani has made now a very long feature-length film about children again, and the main characters in the film are these two young women, and they are filmed during their last year at school before going on to the next school. It's SD, isn't it? They're going from primary school to the first tier of secondary education in Indonesia. And it's a very absorbing film because she spends a year with her subjects, and you really get to know the families, the girls. They're quite amazing characters, a lot of filming in the school. But there is also a political issue around education in Indonesia, because This is a faith school, and time is spent in the curriculum on religious issues, and none of the children, especially not our heroines, get good enough grades to go where they want. And there's a very worrying sequence of the computerized scoring of grades and whose grade is going to get them into what school. It's very, very frightening. We have the similar thing here, but not so sort of regulated as that. And then we see these young women going off to schools that might not have been their first choice, and we wonder what will happen to them. It is a remarkable documentary. It's shot observationally, no voiceover. There's interviews, but you don't hear them. Wonderful relationship between the camera and the subjects, which you can only get when you spend a lot of time with people. This isn't hit and run documentary. It's proper anthropology, in my view. I'm just going to turn now to my last example. I'm running over. Children, this broader interest in children in women's documentaries, I think, is something relatively new. I might be wrong, but it strikes me that there's more interest being paid to children and projects about them. However, my last example, Yuli Andari, did, here she is in 2010, Yuli did make a film about children in Sumbawa in eastern Indonesia back in 2005 called The Little Joki Kecil, and it's about a traditional practice in Sumbawa, where she comes from, of having 6 to 12-year-old boys racing horses, and they are there's a kind of abuse terribly, they suffer very terrible injuries, and you could say it's a kind of form of child abuse. She doesn't say that in the film. This actually won the Eagle Awards documentary competition held by Metro TV as Best Film and Audience Favourite. But Yuli was interested in bringing to public attention what was happening with these children. She is not based in Jakarta, and her subjects are far-reaching. She's made a film about the use of traditional golden needles that singers and prostitutes used to put under their skin or have put under to make them more beautiful. But Yuli films transgendered women and martial arts experts and how they use these needles in a contemporary setting in a non-traditional way. She's also made a documentary about fishing communities in an island in Sumbawa and the challenges that they face in modernity. And the bottom, that one, it's not a very clear, that's from Joki Kecil, I should have said. Yuli Andari's films are so ethnographic, I thought that she was a trained anthropologist, and she said that she has been very much influenced by Aryo Danusiri, but she's a librarian, and her interest in documentary is to provide visual resources. She has also been very, very successful and has gained a lot of awards internationally as well as nationally, and she's trying to come here to do film studies, maybe in London, so you might get to meet her one of these days. So, just a few closing remarks. In the very good book edited by Yvonne Michalek, Indonesian women filmmakers, the senior woman filmmaker, Nanti Atnas, who has taught at IKJ for a long time, she's actually doing a PhD in America now, says that without consciousness of gender, women filmmakers run the risk of reproducing old, stereotyped and patriarchal representations. And in her book, Novi Kurnia, the Indonesian academic whose PhD was on women Indonesian filmmakers, did a survey of all the filmmakers, and most of them said, no, I'm not feminist, I wouldn't want to be considered feminist. And Kurnia cites Atnas's remark, because we know that feminism is always a bit of a hot topic, but the idea that one should be a bit more conscious of gender structures and social, how society reproduces gender roles is important. Andari says that she didn't think there'd be much change in documentary production patterns since 1998. She thinks that within this new exciting era of documentary, things could have gone a bit better. But I would argue that the independent networks I've talked about at Jakarta are starting to achieve their aim of spreading documentary certainly to other parts of Indonesia, and they're getting more attention internationally. Also, more films are being made away from Jakarta, and there are women based in other cities and outside who I haven't been able to speak about today who are doing their work, and there are groups of grassroots community cinema networks springing up using digital technology, a bit like the Purbalingga one that Eric mentioned. So the documentary is not mainstream popular culture, but it is being screened in campuses, it's distributed informally, people trade these DVDs, they give them to each other and say, give me 10,000 rupiah, something, 100,000 I paid for mine. And they are passed around. It's not necessarily within the commercial distribution system, but this is often how things work in Indonesia. There's an informal exchange network. And so documentary, the kind I've been speaking about today, is being shown that way. And so I would say that documentary is a means of raising awareness and producing change. It's not necessarily an end in itself to produce beautifully crafted films. These films are part of social process. They don't mirror society. They're trying to engage and change it, because society is not a thing out there, it's what we're all doing after all. There is also a sense that changes in women's position require collective enterprise, not just individual effort, and this is a recurrent refrain across Southeast Asia, actually. And although I have spoken a little bit about women's position, these films are tending to try to place women's issues within the broader framework of social justice. So not only about women's role, but everybody's opportunity to have a fairer deal. Okay, thank you. I'm done.
Can you maybe introduce Mother Earth, and then we show the film, and then I think we need enough time so that Ajima also has time to present her work, so we won't have time for a reunion. Very sorry about that. But is it okay if you talk about Mother Earth, and then we show the film, and this is also because it's a dance film, so this is a nice connection to what will follow after your talk. Is that okay?
Yes, perfect. So, hello everyone, hello Eric, hello Felicia. This is this film is part of my project. I'm in the AV PhD program in Goldsmiths. My PhD topic is the collaboration, filmmaking collaboration with this particular traditional performance group who are living in the foot of Marapi Mountain, one of the most active volcano in the world, maybe, and they're doing their art as part of the safety rituals and agricultural rituals, but at the same time maybe the lack of pressure that their art must have an economic function for them. The development of their art is remarkable, and I believe that I can create a film with them together. And of course, I started this project from the thinking that so many people, bureaucrats in Indonesia usually, when they talk about creative economy or creative industry, they usually started with jargons like, "Oh, don't worry, Indonesia has so many traditions, but in reality, almost nobody really care about this tradition when we talk about the creative economy. So my project is more about engaging this traditional artists to filmmaking, and then I want to see the problems, the process, and the result later. And this film is part of the process. This is our first film since I started my PhD project. And this film was directed by two persons. One of them is from the group itself, and the other one is from the city. And from this film, I want them to learn from each other, and especially the traditional artists can learn about the professional standard of the film industry in Jakarta, especially because I brought the film crew from Jakarta. And what we had was an interesting process. It was done. The production was done in 2 days, and it was a dance film. We talked about the possibility to send this to different dance film festivals, but as you'll see later in the film, the dance quality, the aesthetic quality from this film is not up to their standards, so they kind of disappointed. But for me, it's one of the process, so they know, because for instance they were part of the production team, and they should learn for the future that when they have a chance to change the content from the beginning, that they should do that before it's too late, for instance. So another interesting part is that from this film we can learn that these people who live in kind of a remote area learn so many new things that sometimes surprise me, like when I asked the people from the village to collect the receipt from so many things that they purchased. They asked me questions of, okay, why do we have to collect the receipt, and I have to explain, oh, this is good for your evaluation process, for the future planning, and so on and so on. So we can learn that they are still new with the modern administrative process, but at the same time, when they finished the film and saw the result is not up to their expectation, in the evaluation process, we could see people talk about, okay, let's send this to the dance film festival and say that this is a dance film produced by peasants, but the other person, no, don't say this is done by peasants. Let's say this was done by farmers. So they understand perfectly the idea of branding, and so this so many different situation in the process. Makes the process interesting, and I think that's it from me. And let's watch the film, and hopefully we can learn some things from it. Thank you.